Hey guys, my name's Dave Goodyear. I'm here at the homestead of Flat Rock. Thanks for joining me today. Today we have a special video. Normally I'm outside doing things, but it's getting colder and the days are getting shorter. It's really hard to get outside and do a bunch of stuff that I'd like to be able to do. But there are still other jobs that I need to do inside. And one of those jobs is getting our cabbages ready for storage. That's coming right up. I'm going to show you guys how I get my cabbages ready. So before we do that, let's talk a little bit about root cellar. So we actually root cellar most of our, harvest vegetables, and they sit there for kind of 6 to 8 months, depending on what it is that we have in there and when we pull it. But cabbages I leave until December. I usually wait till it hits kind of -3 outdoors. And then I know that the cellar is kind of at a good temperature and I can get these cabbages in there and they'll last a long time, but they need to be prepped first. So we need to think a little bit about what a root cellar does. Well, a root cellar really produces subterranean conditions for, well, roots. And roots are quite different than a cabbage. I mean, we talk about a root cellar and sometimes you see cabbages stored in there, but a cabbage is not a root vegetable. I mean, a cabbage is a head and the roots are down below. So in our storage cellar, we basically store everything in damp sawdust. Anything that was in the ground, like a carrot, for example, we store it in damp sawdust. Remembering, of course, that that root, which is a carrot in this particular case, is actually alive. So are rutabagas or beets, so you're trying to produce subterranean conditions that maintain, the life of that root so it can actually stay alive. If it can stay alive, then it means it can store for a long time. Cabbages, like I said, are quite different because the root is underground. What you want to eat is actually above ground. So it's pretty simple. I mean, there's 2 steps. You need to keep the root alive, but you need to keep the head from drying out. So how do we do that? Well, keeping the root alive is easy. You just dig it up. You dig up the root, like so, and you wrap it in a plastic bag. Now, what does a plastic bag do? Well, the plastic bag basically keeps the moisture in the soil around the root. It prevents it from drying to the air. It allows some transpiration through the head of the cabbage during the time, let's say, when the cellar temperature is still a little bit high. I mean, not high, but a little bit high. So like my cellar this time of the year is sitting somewhere around 7 Celsius, which is still pretty good, but that head is going to want to transpire moisture. So basically the roots attached will allow this head to stay alive. Now, in order to be able to keep this head from drying out, you need to think a little bit about the physics of what's going on in a cellar. Okay, so when the temperature is fairly high, what you'll see is that the humidity might be somewhere around 80, maybe 85%. But as the temperature drops, the relative humidity inside the cellar actually starts to increase. Now that works to your benefit because it means that the dew point of that air keeps decreasing, which means that the likelihood that something's going to transpire actually decreases as temperature goes down because, well, if the head is at 100% moisture content or humidity, let's say in this particular case, and the air surrounding is 100% humidity, then there's not a whole lot will happen in terms of water exchange. Now there can be some sort of gas exchange, but there won't be any type of water exchange because there's nothing driving that happening. So during the time when the cellar is actually a little bit higher in temperature, like kind of 7 degrees, which mine is at now, I use something that kind of slows down, I guess, the moisture migration out of the head, but it doesn't produce beads of water in such a way that would lead to it collecting on the head and then end up rotting the head of cabbage. So what do I use? Well, I use paper. So I cut out a piece of paper that's, you know, a little bit bigger than the head. And I found that 2 layers of paper works really, really well. Now, you can use anything really to secure that paper around the head. I've used wire, I've used string. Today, well, I got a bunch of wire here, so I'll probably just use wire. And you don't need a lot of it, you just need enough kind of to wrap around and secure it. Like I said, this is just temporary. When you have things in the cellar, I mean, it's only, you know, during the time when the temperature is a little bit high and the relative humidity is lower that you really got to worry about moisture migration out of the head of the cabbage. So 2 pieces of brown paper. And there you go, that's it. That's basically how we wrap the head. It's literally the root ball, paper around, and some wire, something to, you know, keep the paper on. Now, what's going on is the question. How does this work? And I have some theories about how it works. And so in the first year that we stored cabbage, we just stored the roots in a bucket, and we added some water to the bucket to keep the roots hydrated. But what we noticed was that the leaves basically on top of the head were, you know, mostly starting to dry. So we're like, well, what's causing that? Well, between, let's say, the beginning of December to the beginning of January, my cellar temperature is actually a little bit higher than it should be. It's somewhere around 7 degrees. And the relative humidity is only somewhere around maybe 80–85%. I would like it to be higher. There's only a couple ways to make it higher. You decrease temperature, that increases relative humidity, or you add a moisture source. Now the ground to the cellar is actually open to the earth below, and that does provide some buffering, but obviously not enough. Now when I get all my vegetables in there, the humidity starts to climb, which is great. But until that happens, this head needs to have some way to buffer moisture so that moisture is able to keep it from drying out. So keep in mind, paper is vapor permeable. It means that it can exchange water in both directions, water vapor. It's going to take a little bit of time for the humidity to start building inside in order for it to migrate outwards. And it's only when the moisture inside becomes higher than the relative humidity outside the cabbage head that it actually ends up transpiring moisture outwards. But it slows down that process. It's still a barrier. It slows down that process just a little bit. So it works in the opposite direction also. When the humidity outside is higher, let's say outside the cabbage head, not outside the cellar, inside the cellar but outside the cabbage head is actually higher than inside the paper, then it ends up that moisture will migrate inwards. You'll never get any beading, anything like that. You're not creating anything with a dew point per se as much as that. There's just a way for you to buffer moisture, slowing it down when it wants to move outwards and slowing it down when it wants to move inwards. And I think that that's basically how it works. All right, so that's our 2-step method. Wrap the root in plastic, step number 1. Step number 2, wrap the head in paper, and it'll last for a long, long time. Thanks for joining us today. If you enjoyed this video, give us a thumbs up. You can subscribe to our channel below. We're always producing new content. You can reach out and follow us on Instagram and Twitter at @FR_homestead. and on Facebook at The Homestead at Flat Rock, and well, YouTube, The Homestead at Flat Rock. Thanks for joining me. We'll see you guys next time.